My name is Danika, and today I have my top 17 of 2017. So I'm a little bit embarrassed about this being my top 17 of 2017. I actually made a video where I ranted about how silly it is to continue to add numbers to your top 10, top 15, top 17 every year. And yet here I am. I read about 115 books this year and I just couldn't narrow it down to my top 10, so I ended up with 17. I could have done more. There were more that I wanted to talk about, but I figured that was the last acceptable stopping point. Probably no one wants to watch a top 20 of 2017 video, so here I am with my embarrassing, hypocritical top 17 of 2017. I read about 90-95% of the books this year from the library, so I don't have many of my top ones with me. For number 17, I'm going with Difficult Women by Roxane Gay. This is a collection of short stories. This is an extremely dark collection and should have trigger warnings for rape, violence, as well as a scene of quite extreme fat shaming. It's definitely dark and difficult and has a lot to say about misogyny and kind of the ways that women try to survive it, and being a difficult woman, being someone who doesn't live up to what we expect women to be. It also has moments of fabulism in it, which I wasn't expecting. It's not entirely realism. There are also some queer stories, not a ton of them, but there were a few, which I was very happy to see. And there are some moments of hope in this collection. One story actually completely warmed my heart and I just sighed happily after I finished it. No surprises, that is one of the queer stories. This is one that is not easy to get through, but I thought it was really well done. It was very powerful. And Roxane Gay is definitely an author I'm going to continue to follow. At number 16, I have Knit One Girl Two by Shira Glassman. And if you're as into the queer book internet as I am, you will definitely be familiar with Shira Glassman. She's a fantastic author who does the Mockingbird Series, which is a queer fantasy series with lots of lesbian and bisexual women characters. This is a little novella of hers that's just a really cute, fun story. It has a lot of different niche interest groups represented, so obviously there's the queer women content, both lesbian and bi women. The main character and the love interest are both artists. One is a yarn dyer and one is a painter. There's also a lot about fandom. There's some fat representation. This feels very slice of life and realistic. There's definitely a romance here, but that's not everything that's happening. It's just as much about the two main characters' relationships with their siblings or with fandom. This was just a really fun, light read. You can read it in one sitting. It's only about $2 on Amazon, I think, so you should check it out if any of that sounds interesting. After that is Starcrossed by Barbara D. This is a middle grade book with a bisexual girl as the main character, which is amazing and pretty much a first. And you can tell just from the cover, which has the two girls dancing together, her and her crush, and that's so sweet, and it's just incredible to have a middle grade book that has queer representation and that shows it on the front cover. This is also super cute, and it's about them acting out a Shakespeare production, Romeo and Juliet. It actually has a lot of interesting conversation about Shakespeare and about the production. There's very minimal homophobia in the book. It's cute, it's accepting, and it's more about the dizzying experience of having a crush in middle school than it is about coming out. For number 14, I have Meanwhile Elsewhere, which is a collection of fantasy and sci-fi trans short stories. At least 10 of the 25 stories had sapphic women as the main characters, which is nice. This is a mix of genres and of people represented, but there's definitely more trans women represented and more sci-fi than fantasy and trans men or non-binary people. As always with a collection like this, there is a mix. There are some stories that really spoke to me. Some of them I felt like I could write whole essays about them. They're just so interesting, the ideas addressed. And some stories completely lost me, and I can see how other people would love them, but they were just not personally appealing. Trigger warnings for this collection would include transphobia, transmisogyny, rape, violence, gore, and suicide. In particular, there was one story that had the main character who was raping people, and that one I found particularly distressing. I have my full review linked down below, as well as my reviews for any of the queer women books that I talk about in this list. This was a huge book that covers a lot of ground. Topside Press continues to put out really fascinating books that I will be picking up as soon as they come out. My next one is sort of a silly pick. It's My My Lady's Choosing, an interactive romance novel by Kitty Curran. This I read as a review copy. I'm not sure if it's out yet. It's super fun. It's, as the title suggests, a choose-your-own adventure romance novel. And there is one path where you can have a lady love interest. I expected to just follow that path and only read the queer part, but I actually ended up backtracking and following pretty much all of the different paths you can take because I just found them really fascinating. They all have their own plots and mysteries, and you kind of go into different genres depending on which love interest you go after. Also, there's an option you can take where you basically end up in a lesbian pirate gang, so definitely try to find that one. This was just really fun and I enjoyed spending the whole night just following along the different choices. I think choose your own adventure books, they should be more common. They're so fun. Then there's Tomboy Survival Guide by Ivan Coyote. Ivan Coyote is one of my favorite authors. They have this incredible writing style that is beautiful and also approachable. They just really show this conviction to remain kind even when the world is cruel. Also, this book is beautiful just as an object. There's like a ruler for the back cover. There are all these little diagrams throughout, so of course I love that. It's also interesting because there's kind of this idea in queer culture that being queer takes place in your 20s and that's about it. You don't really hear a lot from anyone who is either a queer kid or a queer adult who is past their 20s or max 30s. Ivan Coyote is in their 40s, and it's really nice to see this depiction of a queer future, of what it looks like to survive that queer adolescence and grow up. And they also have this much more nuanced understanding of queer politics, having seen it through more time. I can't recommend Ivan Coyote's books strongly enough, but this is a great one to start with. It has a lot about gender and politics, but also just personal stories. They are, above all, an amazing storyteller. Another kind of fun one was the Mockingbird series by Chelsea Cain. I am including this as one entry because this series was cancelled far too soon. There are only 2 volumes, but the second volume, only the first half is actually Mockingbird, and then they just fill in the volume by throwing in an Avengers comic that had like the old Mockingbird character that has nothing to do with the series. I would highly recommend just skipping it. Just get the first and second volume, read the actual story all the way through, and then stop and just put it down. The first volume has this puzzle box structure where the first issue you keep seeing Mockingbird as she is brought in on these random doctor appointments and she's getting pulled from whatever she was doing at that moment. So you just kind of see her in scuba gear in one part of the issue, and then the next part she'll have just like a little army of corgis around her, and then throughout the next issues you see what she was doing when she was pulled into the doctor's office each of those times. So you get to see it expand and kind of see how these stories slot together. I love the main character. She has a great sarcastic sense of humor. I laughed out loud several times. I also liked that she was a scientist. I liked the first volume best, but the second volume has a story that includes Merck Orgies, and it has her wearing a shirt that says "Ask me about my feminist agenda" on the cover, which apparently was hugely controversial, and also it has just the ideal ending for a love triangle. Another fun one was the Lumberjane series. I read volumes 1 through 6 just in the last month or so. You might actually remember in my Queer Comics Collection video I mentioned that although I've been collecting these and they seem great, I hadn't actually read them. So after that I did correct my mistake. I did read them and I love them. They're just so fun. The first volume is probably my least favorite, which is not saying much because I still really liked it. It's just these fun fantasy adventure stories set in an all-girls camp, and there's a great diversity of characters here, including a trans character. It isn't until I think a couple of volumes in that you find out that she's trans, and there is also a romance between 2 of the girls, which is very much in the background for most of the series, but they do get their own storyline in I think volume 3, and they do kiss in volume 6. So it's kind of a little bit ambiguous at first, but it gets to be much more blatantly a romantic relationship. But it's sweet and fun, and I loved it, and I will continue to read all of these, and hopefully it just continues forever. And then, of course, I have to mention The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. This is one of those books that honestly could have been half as good, and it still would have been great. It's complex, it's nuanced, it has distinct, well-rounded characters. I really enjoyed the dynamics that were happening between characters. It's, of course, thought-provoking and absolutely wrenching, powerful. I'm running out of adjectives. You've heard the hype about The Hate You Give, and I would have to echo it. So another one that I read the advanced reader copy of, and I don't think it's out yet, is Kim Reaper, Grim Beginnings. This is a comic about a part-time Grim Reaper and the girl who has a crush on her. This was so ridiculously cute. I was just giggling to myself as I was reading it. Becca is just the most adorable main character in a comic I've ever seen. She's got the little hair buns, like kind of Sailor Moon style, and she has like a little tummy, and you can see her stomach outline. You can see just the little outline of her tummy, and that just affected me so much. I'm like, here's this character who is so cute, and she has a tummy, and you can see it, and she's still like wearing adorable clothes and is not bothered by it, and everyone knows she's super cute, and it's funny and goofy, and it has a sweet little romance as well as these ridiculous adventures, including fighting a bodybuilder and his army of cats, and you should just check it out. What more can I say? So apparently I either only know or only love books that are either extreme of dark and difficult and fluffy and fun, because the next book on my list is Hunger, a Memoir of My Body by Roxane Gay, and yes, this is the second Roxane Gay book on this list. This is a dark, sometimes brutal book about her relationship with her body, and it deals a lot with trauma, especially rape, disordered eating, fat hatred. But despite the subject matter, I kept getting pulled in by her casual conversational style. Roxane Gay is bisexual, and even though that's not the main focus of the book, she does talk about her coming out and some of her relationships with other women. This was an incredibly powerful book, but I would really think about before going into it how it would affect you to read about disordered eating, about fat hatred, about hatred of your own body, about rape, but overall I would highly, highly recommend this one. Bouncing back to something a little more fun, River of Teeth by Sarah Gailey. This is a killer hippo western. It's kind of an alternate history. There was a proposal at some point to bring hippos over to the US to be used as meat, and this book explores what that would have been like if it happened, and the US was basically overrun by feral hippos. It has this keeper storyline with this diverse cast of mostly people of color, mostly queer people. It includes a non-binary character who uses they/them pronouns, and the main character is a bisexual guy who's also a person of color. This was super fun, very quick to get through, though it does go a little bit dark in places and there is some gore, but it was such a quick, exciting read. This was definitely one of the books that I had the most fun reading this year. And from fun to exploring your own mortality, my next book is Smoke Guts in Your Eyes and Other Lessons from the Crematory by Caitlin Doughty. I would say this is the book that changed my perspective the most this year. I've been following her YouTube channel Ask a Mortician for a while, and then I listened to the audiobook, which was fantastic because she has a great voice for both the narration and the YouTube videos. Basically, this book is about how we in the West have a really fucked up relationship with death and with mourning and grief. That our relationship with death is built around denial and how much that hurts us. That we don't have healthy rituals in place to deal with grief and with accepting our own mortality. Basically, this is about being death positive, which if you're not familiar, it sounds completely ridiculous until you read this book or until you watch some of her YouTube videos and see how it actually makes perfect sense that we need to have a better relationship with death, that we need to think about it more, and that will help us to live better lives. It is a memoir, and she does talk about some of her mental health issues and how this journey with the death industry affected her and how it got to some pretty dark places. But I thought it was incredibly told and had a lot of really important ideas that I will be considering long after I finished it. Number 4 on my list is Her Body and Other Parties by Carmen Maria Machado. This is a collection of short stories. It blends feminism, queerness, and fabulism. This one I also listened to as an audiobook, but I wish I had read it in print because there's a novella-length story that is all of the episodes of SVU rewritten. And although I really liked the idea and I did start to come around on the story by the end of it, it was so long and I didn't know when it was going to end, and I don't watch Law & Order SVU, so if I had been reading it in person, I would have just skimmed it, and I would have liked to spend more time with the other stories that were very thoughtful and that I would have liked to kind of read a little bit and then think about and then move on. This book is very bisexual, which I was really happy about. I realized that this year I actually read a lot of bisexual books, which makes sense because it's also the year that I've really come to terms with being bisexual and accepted that label. So I actually have fewer lesbian books on this list than usual and more bisexual books, and that's kind of nice to have more books that reflect my own identity. But almost every story in this collection has a queer woman as the main character, usually a bisexual woman. I think my favorite story was the first one, The Husband Stitch, which retells the urban legend about the girl with the ribbon around her neck. If you read Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, you'll remember that one, but this really fleshes it out and also weaves in all of these other urban legends and stories and really exposes the misogyny at the heart of a lot of those stories. This book is beautifully unsettling, gorgeously written. It's definitely a book that makes me want to pick up anything she ever writes. Number 3 on my list is Everfair by Nisi Shawl, which I have difficulty talking about because it's so ambitious and far-reaching and nuanced and complex. It's a steampunk alternate history of the Belgian occupation of the Congo. It also has several queer women as the main characters. It switches between different characters' perspectives. There's tons of point of view characters. I actually lost count. But it means that you get to see these issues from multiple perspectives through different lenses. This spans decades and it covers politics, war, love, grief, betrayal. The steampunk element is actually a lot more in the background than I was expecting. I would say that the relationship between the two women narrators is at the heart of the book. It is not a simple, fluffy, feel-good romance. It's complex, it's deeply flawed, but it's also passionate and genuine, and you see how these two people try to fit together and all of the different things that play out in their relationship around, again, race, power dynamics, and their specific places in the world. This is a very thoughtful book. It took me a while to get through. I think some people criticized it for not having enough action, but that's not really what it's trying to do. It's much more of a meditation on this idea. It almost acts more like a thought experiment. Again, I'll link my full review down below because I have many thoughts about this book. It definitely blew my mind. Another really fun one was Sugartown by Hazel Nulevant. This is a queer polyamorous BDSM fluffy love story. It's fun, it's super quick. This is a tiny little book. What I loved most about this book was that people treat each other with kindness. They check in. They are flawed, but they communicate and they try to do their best by each other. The art is also super cute and warm, and I just wanted to crawl into the pages and curl up there. I love this. This is now definitely one of my go-to happy reads. And finally, my number 1 read of 2017 is Fierce Femmes and Notorious Liars, a trans girl's confabulous memoir by Kai Cheng Tom. I had never understood what a fictionalized memoir was until I read this book. It blends together fairy tale elements, beached mermaids with this hard, unshakable truth. The narrative of poetic, dreamlike prose describes transmisogyny, racism, police brutality, murder, self-harm. It really reworks the idea of the trans memoir and of memoir in general, and it ended up just being a beautiful, brutal, unforgettable read. So those were my top 17 of 2017. I'm sure this was an incredibly long video, so thank you for sticking around for the whole thing. Let me know what some of your favorite reads from 2017 were and what you thought of these if you've read any of them, and thank you for watching.